so I'll know.
Hey y'all, we're back.
We had some
Fix our
technical
technical
difficulties.
difficulties.
Hey y'all.
Yeah.
Hi.
All right, just before we get started, we have to read our disclaimer. We are not providing diagnoses, recommendations for treatment, therapy, none of that stuff on air. We're just answering general mental health questions and hope that we can educate our community a little bit. Yeah?
Right.
All right, let's get started. So we already have a question in. So I'm going to go ahead and put it up here on the screen. First question: how do you learn to release control when you've been conditioned to be a problem solver and that's all you know how to do? Let me give a little bit of context to what this person was asking. So this person was saying, especially when that role is being reinforced by the success you experience from maintaining control over things. How do you learn how to release that control?
Anybody gonna go ahead and take that?
So I guess I'll go. When you've conditioned to be when you've been conditioned to be a problem solver, it's definitely not easy to release control. I would say it depends on what you're releasing control to or who you're releasing control to. Um, Recognizing that, looking at what you're trying to control. Are you trying to control kids? Are you trying to control a husband? Are you trying to control your job? And then you have to think, okay, is this in my locus of control? So like there's this serenity prayer. God grant me the things, grant me the wisdom to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. God grant me the serenity. So I like that. And we always use that in substance abuse because he says, grant me this serenity to accept things I cannot change. So if you can't change something, then there's no reason to try to control it. The courage to change the things I can is if, okay, can you change it? Can you control it? If you can't control it, then do whatever is within your power to get to a point of where you're making things better for yourself. And the wisdom to know the difference. Is this something I can control? Is this something that I cannot control? And that's completely up to you. Make a list. What in this is within my control and what's out, and then you got to proceed accordingly.
Okay. I'm gonna take well, I definitely agree with Auntie Shug, but I want to also give a different perspective because we probably do have viewers who are not religious or spiritual at all. So a prayer of any kind might not resonate for you. So if you want to come at your being controlling from another angle, when I work with clients who are dealing with control issues, I like to have them kind of discover where their control issues started. And a lot of times they find out those control issues started in childhood. They had a certain type of parent, a certain type of attachment style that placed them in a position to where they felt like they had no control. So now they tend to want to control everything so it doesn't feel chaotic. So you kind of ask yourself, what is it with me and having control? Why do I feel like I have to have control? Is it because I'm scared that if I don't have control, things are going to go haywire? Like, so kind of ask yourself those introspective questions to get to the why you feel you have to have control. And once you get to that why, it becomes a lot easier to kind of do what we like to call opposite action. It's a DBT skill. So opposite action. The second you feel like you have to control something, just do the opposite. Like, I want to control this. I'm going to actively step back. You have to be very self-aware and conscious to do that, though. So it's not an easy thing, but it's something that you can start kind of trying out.
Dang, Ash, you took all the words out of my mouth. No, it's the second part of it that resonates with me as well. Definitely getting to the core of it. One of the analogies I always use in therapy is, it's probably not the best one, but it works for the people that I work with. Is if you think about a fire, right? And you've got the flames, you've got the base of the fire. And whenever you're taught to put out a fire, you're always taught to put out the base of the fire so that it doesn't come back. However, a lot of the times when we try to release control or we try to change our behavior, we're only putting out the flames for the time being because we're not figuring out the why. Like, what is the source of it? What's the underlying reason? And then it continues to come up. So, like Ashley said, finding the why will definitely extinguish that fire at the base so that it doesn't come back. So you don't have to continue to have problems with it. But the other thing is the behavior part of it. It is very difficult to unlearn a behavior that you have been engaging in for years, right? From childhood. So sometimes you can do it on your own, and sometimes you might need to source out to other people to help you. For example, if you're not self aware and you haven't yet done that work to find out your why, maybe you can talk to your friends, your family members, your spouse, your kids, and say, hey, you know what? I realize that I'm controlling. I've been trying to control these things for a long time. If you notice that I'm getting in that mindset, please let me know. And don't get offended when people let you know. That helps you with your awareness without having to necessarily get to therapy right now. And then the other piece too is when they tell you like you're being controlling again. Oh, okay. Well, these are the things that I need to do in order to pull back a little bit. And it's not easy. Never easy.
Mhm. Anybody else got anything to add?
First, second, and third, everything.
Listen, if y'all type in questions and you specifically want Auntie Keish to answer, you could say that.
Yeah.
Auntie Keish.
Yeah.
If you want to call one of us out, you could do that. So you can call out.
Don't call me out because I'm not good on camera. Please don't. No, I'm just kidding.
Not
All
the
right.
way
So
she was just talking and explaining that thoroughly.
Right.
Not good on camera.
no, now if you're talking about behavior change, I could talk about that all day long.
Oh, and y'all, listen, I'm just looking down because I'm trying to keep up with the watching us on Facebook to make sure it's all good. So I'm looking down at my phone to check us.
All
With
right.
the
Well,
questions too.
I was gonna do a quick shout out to Ashley. Hey Ashley, we doing good. How you doing, girl? And then another shout out to Mika, one of our loyal supporters. Hi.
Hey, Nika.
I
And
want to
then,
do a shout out. Today is my baby brother's birthday. He's 24 today. Happy birthday.
Hey,
happy
happy
birthday,
baby brother.
All right, so for those of you that might have just be hopping on, we're just answering questions, anything related to mental health, relationships, any of that. Go for it. And again, you can call out Auntie Shug, Auntie Keish, or Auntie Ashley if you have any specific questions for them. All right.
Mhm.
We do have a question that just popped up. Um, this is from Dorian Dula, my brother. Whoop whoop. How do you keep your sanity when trying to get someone to see your perspective when they're just not getting it?
Ooh, baby, the
Ooh,
aunties
that's a
already
good one.
know. The aunties
That
already
is a
know
good
this is a
question.
hard one for me.
Yeah.
Baby, I can't even help you because this is my personal struggle.
Listen, on TikTok, somebody was like, just say okay. Okay.
That
Okay.
works.
Listen, Dorian, I'm gonna tell you right now. I let people be loud and wrong, and I let them stay loud and wrong because I'm at a point in my life to where I don't have time to have my peace questioned. I don't have time to disturb my own peace. And think about what's happening. You're trying to get somebody to see your perspective when they have their own perspective. And so 9 times out of 10, they don't want to come to your side. That's why they have their own perspective. And so if you're going to be going through the motions of trying to get somebody to see why you see things that way or trying to change somebody's mind, it's difficult to change somebody's mind who already has their mind made up. So like TikTok Keish said, okay. And as adults, we agree to disagree. Have your opinion. That's fine.
Also, it depends on what you're trying to get them to see your perspective on. So
Correct.
there's a difference between core beliefs, which are things that are ingrained in you that you believe about the world, about people, about society, whatever. Those are extremely hard to change. that is like a therapeutic thing. You go to therapy to get those to change. But if it's something about, I don't know, like the way you do something, like the way that you fix a car, or something light like that, it depends on the person. Some people are receptive to other people's perspectives, and some people just are not. And so that's a personality trait of whoever it is that you're talking to.
Yep.
And you know
And
what I like to do? I present facts. Let me show if it's a fact based thing, people can never ever refute data. So
Mhm.
if it's something that you have and you're like, no, this is what it says right here. What are you talking about? And they still don't want to see this personality, and you ain't gonna change nobody's personality.
listen, the
That's
world
when
we
you
live in
say,
now, people try to fight facts all the time. Listen,
Mhm.
and that's very hard. And that's what I was gonna say when Auntie Amber mentioned core beliefs. Our core beliefs and our value system is one of the hardest things when somebody opposes it or has a whole different perspective. Um, and usually, when it comes to presenting factual information, people can, especially in today's society with social media, people can easily go somewhere and find something that supports their side.
Mhm.
So it depends on what we're talking about. Like, for example, current situation happening in society, the new Little Mermaid movie coming out. That is bringing up a lot of what some of us know are racial issues. We know that. We know that. But we are often told it has nothing to do with race. So see, now you have to combat a perspective that you wholeheartedly believe this is what the issue is, but they are telling you that's not what it is. So that's very hard because that's hitting you in your core beliefs and your value system. So that's different. That's different and it's difficult.
So basically, if you're trying to change somebody's core beliefs or their values, it's not going to work. So you can walk
yeah,
away from the situation. If it bothers you to walk away, because some people, it bothers them to not like finish the conversation.
Ashley.
If it bothers you to walk
No,
away,
I admit it.
Ashley,
I already
then
said this is my struggle. Don't be calling me out. I was accountable from the jump.
oh my god, then you have to figure out what it is about, like what bothers you so much, and you got to work through that yourself too, because
Mhm.
a lot of situations as adults you just have to walk away from. Like literally, somebody's in the middle of their sentence, and I will walk away if it's not making any sense or if we've been going back and forth for too long.
But listen, it's easier to walk away from people you don't know. Like if I get into a debate with somebody on social media and this is a perfect stranger, I can easily say, "All right, you got that. 2 + 2 is 7. Go on, honey. Go on about
Mm-hmm.
your day." It's
Yeah.
harder to do that when it's somebody you care about. It is harder to walk away when you care about this person and you don't want to lose a friendship or lose an important relationship because of this core belief difference. But it happens. This comes up in couples therapy a lot. When couples don't have similar core beliefs, it can be a struggle.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, we
Yeah.
have another question.
All right, let's see. Abraham Walker, also one of our biggest supporters. Whoop whoop. What up, Abe?
Hey. Uncle
What
A.
what are y'all doing to break the stigma of Black and Asian males that choose not to go to therapy? Normalize it per se.
I think that's a double. I think that's a. There you can answer that in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, I think normalizing it, like having more representation, and I think that the more younger Black males, the more younger Asian males get to see themselves in these positions, will help them normalize in going to therapy and having these conversations constantly. But are you asking women per se, or just the field of psychology? Is that what you're asking? I just wanted to make sure. 'Cause he said, "What are y'all? What are you all?" So I don't know if that means like psych in general, the mental
Or
No,
like
health
us
us.
field,
four.
or us four. But
Yeah.
I would say in general, I'm going to go with the general approach. Psychology in general needs to increase their diversity because 5% of us represents psychologists, and that's Black. 3% is Black females, 2% are Black males. And for Asians, it's even lower. So without that representation, we tend to not have as many individuals that want to go into this field, nor bring people into the field that look like them, like to therapy. In addition to that, I think there's also some cultural, as we've been talking about, core beliefs. A lot in the Asian community do not believe in mental health or do not think that it exists or believe even on the professional side, that it doesn't pay as much as an MD, which is why you see them going to more higher paid tech, engineering, medical doctor as their choice, because they see that as being wealthy or being of upper class. So it's like, I know we went to school with someone who was of Asian descent, and his family did not recognize, him going into the psychology field. So I think that there's a lot of cultural beliefs, and there's a lot of work that the APA needs to do to increase that. But we're trying. That's why we're doing things like this, so it can encourage other minorities to possibly put out information to help their communities get involved in therapy.
I think also I worked with a lot of Asian males when we lived in Hawaii, and it's stigmatized and they're regarded as weak when
Mhm.
they go to therapy, and it's shameful to the family. And so even in the Black community, it's there's a stigma of shame around it, as if, we don't have time to be sick. We don't have time to work on our mental health because I got to get these bills paid and I have to do all these things. So as Auntie Keish said, is breaking down those stigmas and breaking down those walls, and talking to, even if your spouse is Black, if your spouse is a Black male, why don't we go together? Because sometimes people don't want it to look like you're sick. Why don't you go to therapy? And so if you kind of say, why don't we go together and use it as a preventative maintenance tactic instead of wait until you get sick and something happens, then I think that helps people not feel so stigmatized when they want to do it.
Yeah. One of oh,
Oh, go ahead, Amber.
I was gonna say one of the things that I'm doing is starting with the Black men in my life. I can't speak to the Asian males because I actually haven't had any Asian male clients. But the Black men in my life, I have been when I see that they're struggling with a lot and they won't say it, you'll see it in their behaviors, you'll see it in their presentation, their facial expressions. Then I'm encouraging them to go as well, and letting them know like it's okay. At least try it. That's the hard part. So if you get your foot in the door and you get a therapist that you really like and you really respond to, boom, you got it. You're going. The problem is they get their foot in the door and get to a therapist that they're not responding to, then it's that immediate shutdown again. And I'm not going anymore. I'm not doing it anymore. So that's the challenge that's been presented. But like I said, I'm starting with the people in my life and hoping that they're going to encourage their friends, their fathers, people at work. Like it'll spread with that awareness.
Yeah. I take a couple of different approaches when it comes to that stigma for Black men. That's who I'm most in community with, or Asian men, Hispanic men, whoever that struggles because of cultural issues. Um, One approach is I like to start young. So if I can reach younger boys, they're gonna grow up to be men and they'll be
Mm-hmm.
comfortable with therapy by that time. So it won't even be an issue. So starting really young, like my son is 9, and I've already made him aware. You can talk to you can talk to your school counselor. If you need to talk to somebody, you can tell me and I'll get somebody, and he knows it's okay. And then the one other thing, in Colorado, there is it's two that I know of, but there are two literally all male led group practices, all Black male led, which was shocking to me.
Where
So
is that at?
in Colorado,
Oh,
of
really?
all places.
Dang,
I was
that's
like, where in
dope.
the world? So in Colorado, when I get male clients, or when I get somebody who say, I want my husband or my boyfriend, cousin, whoever, I want him to try therapy, but I don't think he gonna be with it. I'm like, well, would he prefer to talk to a Black man? Would he prefer that? So if you can find that, that's awesome. And there are Black male therapists. There's not a lot, but they're there. So finding someone who looks like them makes it a little bit easier. I found they're like, all right, I'll give it a shot if it's another Black man.
Okay. And then I'm just going to put a resource up here for finding Black therapists for men as well. Give me a second. Therapyforblackmen.org. I have sent this
Mm-hmm.
link to so many people
Mm-hmm.
because, like, when you go on and you find therapists in your area,
My bad.
You'll find Black men, you'll find Black women, but you get to choose from whether you want virtual, in person. So it is a really good resource. And it's something that if you're ashamed of looking for therapy or not necessarily wanting people to know, you can get on there and do it on your own. It also lists whether they provide free consultations or not. It lists what types of services they provide and the contact information. So it's a really nice resource.
And virtual is pretty dope because if you live in a small area, like say you live in a small town, like we're from Niagara Falls, you probably aren't going to find a Black male therapist in the Niagara Falls area. But because therapists are licensed in their state, you can be talking to somebody that live in New York City. So you can virtually find a therapist within your whole state. So it gives you a bigger pool if you're doing telehealth.
Yep.
All right, new question.
Speaking of changing core beliefs, what is y'all's opinion on epistemology? Well,
Y'all want me to take that? One of y'all can take it.
Do your thing, Ash.
Do we need to, well, you know what, for the viewers that are watching, to define epistemology, it's the
it
investigation.
is. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
You
Keith.
got it?
Got it.
You
Too.
got it.
It's the
Go ahead.
investigation of what distinguishes justified belief from opinion. So it's the theory of knowledge, especially with regards to its methods, validity, and scope. So basically, beliefs and facts from opinion. This is my opinion. So she's asking, what's our opinion on epistemology?
Well, I'm going to always go with the facts. I think it's and I think it's just a ethical duty of ours when we go into these programs or become doctors or have our masters and get licensed. We are held by the our organizations to protect the public, and that includes providing them factual information, doing all types of studies, looking at research, staying up to date on research. However, I do believe that has been challenged over the past 4 or 5 years due to the political landscape. So we have had, I believe, a hard time trying to separate opinion from facts because a lot of people are influenced by celebrity culture. They're influenced by all different type of things. And let's just be honest here, only 3% of the country has doctorates. So a lot of the information that people are reading, they don't even know how to read or don't even understand what they're reading because they don't.
You ain't wrong.
Like, can you tell me what a p-value is? Can you tell me what an RCT is? Can you tell me what a regression is or ANOVA? Can you tell me that? So if that's not something that you can talk to me about or understand limitations of a study, then we pretty much don't have anything to talk about. However, it is our duty, at least in my opinion, to educate the public on what we know and what science to be. Now, does science stay the same? No, it definitely changes. That's why it's called a hypothesis. We may gather our information and it may tell us something, and then in 5-10 years, we gather information again, it'll tell us something different. So for me, I tend to lean more on the fact side and try to educate as much as possible and accurately as possible.
Same here. And the facts are what sway my opinions about things. Fact-based opinions are different. These things can go hand in hand. You can have an opinion about something and have the facts to back your own opinion. So that makes it slightly different from just having an uneducated opinion, an opinion where you didn't do any kind of research, any kind of anything, and you just haven't thought about something. But to help me here too, I kind of have to remember that statistically, and this is not to say that anyone is better than anyone else, but statistically, over 2/3, I think, of the country are only educated or only read at like an 8th grade level. Mm-hmm. So you have to remember that when talking to people. Everybody might not be where you are. So they might strongly believe that they are presenting you with some factual knowledge and not know that those facts are skewed.
But just because you read at an 8th grade level don't mean you understand at an 8th grade level.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
I read at a higher level, by the way, y'all. But like you know what I mean? Some people I always ask the question of how are you qualified to have that opinion? Who qualifies you to have that opinion? So if you go to the doctors, to a medical doctor, then they're qualified to have a medical opinion. You go to a psychologist and you want to know about the brain, and a neuropsychologist, you want to know about the brain. They're qualified to have an educated opinion on that. So consider your source, I would say.
Consider your source and consider what it is, because see, that's different. A medical
Yeah.
issue, yes, a doctor is going to be the source, but if it's something like, for example, one big thing, parenting. There was a question that just came up that I think we're going to answer next. Parenting, there is no cookie cutter answer for a lot of parenting questions. There is no, yes, we have research and we understand child development, and that's great, but children are unique, they're different, they're human beings, so there's not one cookie cutter way to be a parent. So therefore, considering your source becomes a little bit more difficult in that case.
And speaking of parenting, as a parent, where do you draw the line between doing too much and not doing enough? This person says they're aware of the threshold, that the threshold differs from kid to kid, but what signs or cues should they look for?
Signs or cues of what?
Of whether they're doing too much as a parent or not doing enough.
Oh, okay. They're gonna be reading at a 7th grade level. Um,
Oh my God.
Yo,
Shut up, Shug. Shut
you.
up. Why? Why?
She don't never know what goes on. She just be
She
like,
always act like
what?
this.
What?
I was reading some of the questions, but what do y'all want to take it first?
I'm not a parent, so I'd rather.
Sometimes we got to
You
tell
are a
you.
parent.
But I feel like the parent should be answering it. That's what
All
I
right,
feel like.
fine. Go
We're
ahead,
not
Shug,
talking
and then I'll
about
go
this
after
one.
you.
You gonna
So,
bite me, Ashley? You gonna bite me?
I will go with doing too much. This is going to be an educated opinion, but by it, like, and it's a very biased. It's an educated opinion, I'll say. So, doing too much, right? Some people are helicopter parents. Some people don't let kids learn on their own. So, one of the things that we talked about in one of our episodes was authoritarian and authoritative. And authoritative is, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, because sometimes I mix the two up. But authoritative is when when you are the strict disciplinarian. And
Other one,
okay,
authoritative. I mean, authoritarian.
authoritarian, you're the strict disciplinarian, and do as I say, not as I do, and you do exactly what I tell you to do. Don't ask questions. Don't have your own thought processes. And so when you start to do too much of that, then your kids start to act out. They start to not have their own thoughts about things. They're not able to learn from things. And I think you start seeing it in behaviors. You start seeing it in the way that the way that they handle problems, fits, what I mean? Just things that make them rebel. Because think about it, as adults, we don't want to always be told what to do, what to wear. We want to have some sort of autonomy. And so if you find yourself not giving any autonomy to your kids, then that probably means you're doing too much. And on the flip side of that, when you are given when you're doing permissive parenting, you also start to see the acting out behaviors. So I would say watch behaviors in your children, because they always tell you what they need through their behaviors.
Agreed. I would say always ask yourself at least one question when you are trying to decide in a given moment, okay, am I doing too much or am I not doing enough here? Ask yourself, why am I doing this? Am I doing this because I want the outcome to look like how I want it? Or am I doing this considering my child's autonomy and their capability to make a choice or handle this themselves or need to learn this for themselves without me hovering and doing too much? Like, always ask yourself, why am I actually doing this? Why do I want to do this? Am I trying to live vicariously through my child here? Am I trying to make sure that they don't make the same mistakes I did? What am I trying to do? So, and why am I putting on too much right now? Or do I need to back up? Because usually it's you worry that you're doing too much and it might cause an issue. So you want to know if you need to pull back a little bit or if it's okay to pull back. And depending on the child, watch for the signs. You'll know if it's okay to pull back.
Let me put in a plug too that we have an episode this Friday. It's this Friday, right?
Yeah.
About some aspects of parenting, not all of it, because it's a whole bunch. We can't fit that in an hour, but it does semi address this. I have two responses. One is like Ashley saying, I feel like Auntie Ashley and Auntie Suge done switch, because Auntie Suge is always the one like, but why? Find the why. But I agree. Find the why to your behavior, and why you're trying to control your child, or trying to control whatever the world and keep them protected, whatever the reason is. But then also think about approaching it in terms of like, so in the school systems, they approach it in terms of like least restrictive first, right? So they put the kids all in a general education classroom where they're all together, and they just see how the kids function. If you have a kid who can't function very well in that environment, they'll move them to a smaller classroom. If they still can't function there, they move them to a smaller classroom. So aside from having all of the control in the beginning and trying to do too much in the beginning, they kind of start off with a little bit, check to see how the kid is doing, and then you increase control if you realize that your kid can or cannot handle it. And I know we're not talking just about control, but that's what came to mind. The other thing is teaching your kids to, or allowing a safe space for your kids to talk to you, because if they have that safe space, if they don't feel scared that you're going to overreact, or they're not scared that they made a mistake and you're going to get upset with them, then they will feel comfortable coming to you saying, hey mom,
Yeah.
I really didn't want to go do that today, but you kind of made me because you really wanted me to do it and I didn't. And that's your cue. Like, okay, I'm doing too much. Like, my kid really doesn't want to be involved in this thing. I'm forcing them to do it. I need to back up a little bit. But allowing that space for your children, because then once they're comfortable talking to you, they will tell you. They'll let you know.
Open dialogue.
Oh, and let me add a caveat. I don't know how to say that word, but let me add something to that. Because a lot of the times people on the outside looking in, and I've had this happen to me quite a few times, will tell you like, oh, your child's being disrespectful, or your child doesn't listen, or your child is this, your child is that. No, I've taught my child that they can come to me with their concerns and we can talk about it. So it's respectful. I've allowed that space for them. If my daughter comes and says that I did something that she didn't like, that's not disrespectful. She's communicated that to me. And then I know that I'm doing too much and I need to chill out, because I am the anxiety parent too.
You know what I think? And this was related to another question, but Silas said preventative maintenance versus crisis. He's never considered mental health as a preventative maintenance. I am a big proponent of getting your kids therapy. I believe that kids, especially at a certain age, you're not going to take a 5-year-old to therapy unless there's, maybe a crisis. But I'm a big proponent of getting your kids therapy when they're going through those motions, because sometimes we have teenagers and preteens, and they start having hormones, and they start having things that make them act out, and it might be something or it might be nothing, but getting them an outside source, because sometimes people don't want to only talk to mommy. Like my daughter, she talks to me about everything, but some areas she's like, maybe this ain't your area. And I'm okay with that, because as long as you're getting it out, and I'm teaching you that you have a safe space somewhere, then I think that it breeds healthy children with healthy mindsets, at least.
All
I'm gonna
teenagers need therapy.
Every
Once they
every
hit the age of like
11,
11 or 12,
11, 12 and up.
give them some therapy, because it's so much going on that
Listen,
parents don't even know about.
he had a follow-up question of how could I or anyone advocate for mental health as preventative maintenance versus crisis. He said that comment earlier really just opened my mind. So I just wanted to answer that really quick. And I'm a big fan of modeling, which means like if you go to therapy and show others that it is something, a normal part of your life, just like you go to the medical doctor, that is a way to advocate for someone, because all someone needs is may need is someone to show them that they're doing it too. We there's a thing called inspiration. So you may inspire somebody if you go to therapy, to go seek help, and that could be your advocacy just by you be modeling that behavior as well.
yeah, and I'm a firm believer that you can't advocate without doing it yourself. You can't tell someone therapy's good for you and you need to go, and then they come at you. Well, have you ever been to therapy? No, but that comes off so wrong to people. It's like, so you telling me to do something that you yourself have never done. So you have to be able to say, yeah, I've done it and it worked for me. It did this for me.
Yeah.
It helped me in this way. You have to be able to say that. So the biggest way to advocate is to actually be doing it yourself. Like Auntie Key said, mirroring it.
And
You know, I tell people, I say, I'm sorry, Auntie Amber. I say, your car. You don't wait. You get oil changes, you get gas. You don't wait until it breaks down. You make sure that you're preventative maintenance, because in your car, if you never get an oil change, it's gonna break. Your engine's gonna break. There's, the one small thing is gonna turn into something big. The problem is gonna manifest. And so you do the same thing with your mind. If something is small and you're not seeing a way out of it, or even if you are seeing a way out of it, but it would be helpful to talk to somebody unbiased, unlike, not a family member or somebody that's just going to have a biased opinion, then you go and get that preventative maintenance. Okay, because it might be small, but do I really want it to be a full-blown fire? Where there's smoke, there's typically fire. So if you go ahead and handle the smoke, the fire will not get as big as the fire won't get big.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of read that question a little differently, so I'm gonna answer it anyways, but it might not be what this person is asking. Because I was thinking advocating in terms of, like, sometimes where you try to get services through your insurance and they tell you, oh, it's not medically necessary, meaning you're not in crisis, so we're not going to cover it. Um, you know, you can always report some major change in your life. You're not lying, because things are always changing in someone's life. Um, but you can do that when you realize that there are things that could potentially happen, in a couple of months or a couple of years or whatever. I was thinking of it in terms of that. So I know that was an odd way of doing that. But yeah, if you want to seek therapy and you're not able to get it covered by insurance because it's not medically necessary, there are always changes in people's lives that are happening. People always have like a typical level of anxiety that you can report. That's typical with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you go and you do that, then you can help others get access to the services as well,
Mm-hmm.
and help them advocate for themselves.
And real quick, advocating for the preventative part, I like to tell people, even if you feel nothing's wrong, here's the thing. You could always say, okay, so go to learn the tools to be able to handle it when something does come up, when something does go wrong. Like
Yeah.
preventative and proactive means I'm just going to learn the tools so I'll be able to handle this when it happens, because life is going to happen. So you
If I
can
stay
always,
ready, I don't have to get ready.
right.
And preventative maintenance does not always have to be long term. There is a such thing called short term therapy, or brief therapy. So you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to be in therapy for years upon years. You can literally go to get what you need, and as long as you and your therapist agree that you've made progress or met your treatment goals, there it is. You don't have to be in therapy forever.
Yeah.
That's not even what it's meant for.
Mhm.
That's a good point.
All right, we got a next question by Tabitha. What are your thoughts on some therapists misdiagnosing Black men and women because of stereotypes associated with behavior? And I'm not laughing because that's funny. I'm laughing because I know we're about to go off on this one.
Let me slick my edges back.
Tab,
Oh my
Tab,
gosh.
you
It
should have
happens
directed
so
that to Auntie
much.
Keish first.
Let me,
Yes,
let me
go
slick my
ahead,
edges
Keish.
back.
Go ahead,
That
Keish.
first.
Kill it.
First of all, it's trash. Number one, Tabitha. It is immediately trash. They need to cut the shit. And here's why. Because obviously, back in the 1960s, a lot of Black men were misdiagnosed with this disorder, schizophrenia, which was typically made for middle class white women. Well, when the Black Panthers went out into the streets to advocate and protest, they started labeling Black men as aggressive, murderous, and things of that nature back in the 60s. So
Yeah.
since then, they have been misdiagnosing Black men since then. And as we all know, diagnosis drives treatment plans. So if you're trying to treat someone and you have the wrong diagnosis, that means you're not giving them the correct treatment goals, which then steers them in the wrong direction and possibly could give them medication that they don't need.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, there's a lot of cultural nuances when it comes to our culture and how our symptoms are able to basically be, observed when we're having some sort of crisis. So typically, African Americans go to church, and a lot of them say they speak to God, see God, and things of that nature. And that can be passed off with possibly a non minority clinician who may think that individual is hallucinating when
Yep.
that is not even what is going on. It just means that this person is using their spiritual framework to address their symptoms or whatever crisis that they're in. So my thoughts on that is that we need to do better as not only a organization, but we also need to have more culturally competent therapists who understands the symptomology of Black males and women.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go ahead and piggyback on that too. I always use this example because I remember being in school and I was like, I was driving down the street and a cop asked me, and they stopped me. I was in a black Audi. I was in young in an Audi, looked like I ain't supposed to be driving that car, and they stopped me, and he said, let me have your social security number, and I gave him my social security number. So I get to school and they're like, "Oh, you're so dumb. Why did you do that?" And it's a bunch of white people. "You're so dumb. You should have never given out your social security. You never do that. You never do this." But I was scared. And so I'm petrified because I'm a black woman. I'm in the backwoods of Louisiana, and this white cop, I got my baby back there, and it's just me and him. And this white cop asked me for something. Now, I probably ain't even supposed to be giving him that, but guess what I did? I gave it to him because I was nervous. And so the first thing people do is they look at that and they see, "Oh, well, you're scared, you're paranoid." And a black person, it's not paranoia because we wake up dead all the time from stuff like that, but other people get to walk away from those situations. And so if you're trying to treat somebody and you're trying to tell them, you don't have to fear this and you don't have to fear that, and there you diagnosing them as a paranoid schizophrenic, or they think that somebody's out there to get them, and like you said, it drives your treatment goals, then you're doing harm. So I advocate for black men getting therapy by other black men, other black clinicians. And that's not to say that you can't find a good clinician of another race, but you need to make sure, and black men need to make sure that whenever they are, and women need to make sure that whenever they are looking for therapists, that they need to find somebody who's culturally competent. Because if you meet somebody and they're making you feel like you're paranoid for things that literally happen in your everyday life, they're not for you. You need to interview your therapist. They need to interview their therapist.
Right. I also think there was a an example of like something happening at a hospital, and somebody said on TikTok how like the Black family had this really big reaction to this death while in the family. So it was a lot of screaming and yelling out, and there were obviously white providers in there who were basically scared and fearful. And someone said, instead of you taking the time to understand that grief reactions are different, especially when it comes to different cultures, you are instead judging these people and then putting this whole thing of you're fearful and could possibly call the cops and get these people in trouble, all because they're having a grief reaction that's different from what your culture looks like. So it's important for us to understand that different cultures have different type of displays of their emotion, and it's okay. And it doesn't necessarily mean someone's angry, someone's mean, someone's murderous. Like, to even know that that's the type of stereotypes that we get is absolutely egregious.
Yep. I fully agree. And Suge, I knew you were going to tell that story because that's when you were coming back and forth to my place in Louisiana.
Yeah.
And when you told me about it, my reaction literally was, well, you was on a back street in Louisiana. Like,
Yeah.
what? Like, I completely understood from jump. This is why I love this question, because this is specifically why my style of therapy is the way it is. I will not diagnose anybody until I factor in systemic issues, oppressive issues. I'm not diagnosing anything until I factor in every part of every intersection you hold, because we, like she said, our emotional reactions, our behaviors, even the things we say are different, and we know that they are nuanced. We don't mean it the same way. So I would definitely say that Black people in general probably need to seek therapy with Black clinicians. And that's not to say a white clinician cannot be good. It's to say that all the cultural competency in the world does not remove implicit bias. It doesn't. So
Yeah.
they can be really good. They can be culturally competent. They can understand certain things within different cultures, but that doesn't remove the implicit bias, especially if they don't actively work on their implicit bias. So that misdiagnosis, I can't stand it. And oddly enough, the first client that I ever had that was previously misdiagnosed was a white woman, but she was a kid when it happened. She's like, they just diagnosed me with this as a kid, and that stuck with me because they didn't try to test for anything else. So it's fascinating how often misdiagnosis happens in general, but specifically with people of color.
Shout out to Tabitha for doing that question. She said, "Where's my biggest supporter?" Shout out.
She had me cracking up over here while Suge was telling her story. I'm like, I need to stop before I look like I'm laughing at her.
Petty, you want her shout out?
Hey, Tabitha. Biggest supporter.
That's my sister, y'all.
Huh?
That's my sister.
Oh,
Oh, okay. Well, I was just gonna, y'all know I'm gonna come with the kids, right? Because my biggest pet peeve is when kids are diagnosed by 9 mental health professionals for ADHD, black kids, black little boys and black little girls for ADHD, like all the time. I just had one in my office today, and it just pisses me off every single time because what happens is the teachers or the doctors or whoever else in this person's life are saying, "Oh, this kid is hyper. Oh, this kid can't pay attention, can't focus," and automatically go to it being ADHD. A lot of clinicians do that as well, and that absolutely needs to stop because you're overdiagnosing black children with ADHD and you're underdiagnosing them with the things they're actually struggling with. And then these little kids are getting put on medications for ADHD and it's having the opposite effect because maybe they have anxiety or maybe they have depression or maybe so it's hyping them up even more because they don't have that neurodevelopmental issue going on. So yes, for black men and women, but for black children, that is the reason why I got into working with children and families because I've seen so many psychologists just look at a child, talk to the parent for a few minutes, and say, "Oh, it's ADHD." I'm like, bro, you even talk to the kid. Does the kid gonna tell you they worry about things a lot? They didn't eat that much this morning. Like they're gonna tell you all of that, and you have to consider all of that information. So
let alone the socioeconomic, like the social part of that, like the stressors, the trauma that, like, child.
All of that.
And just like we say for adults, when we've said numerous times that things show up differently in black women or black men, things show up differently in black children. Anxiety looks different in black children and children of color. Depression looks different. We present it differently. Some people of color, black people will present it like the criteria states, but for the most part, we present it differently even as children.
Yep. And we have a couple of comments about our responses. So Silas says, I was going to ask about the kids. Thanks for addressing that. You're welcome. I always come with the kiddos. And then Tabitha says, yes, 5-year-olds misdiagnosed when it's age appropriate and they become zombies from the medication, which is often a misconception that parents have about it and won't do medication because of that. Go ahead.
Let me speak to the medication part. And this is important because some people's kids, if they're becoming zombies from the medication should not make you a zombie if you have ADHD. If you have ADHD, medication that's making you a zombie is too much medication. And so I think what happens too is a lot of people don't go back and go get their medication titrated and they don't change the dosage and they don't see what works. And sometimes you need to change the molecule as well. So people who truly have ADHD and they turn into zombies on their medication is either not ADHD or their medication they have too much medication in their system.
Yeah, that dosage is too high.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to answer our last two questions. I think it's 3, actually. I skipped one. Sorry, Abe. All right, so...
Bubba, go ahead.
Okay, somebody else can read because I feel like I'm being controlling right now. I need to back off.
Okay. I'll read it. So this is from Lamika. I think I said that right. Lamika. A coworker came to me stating they are having a hard time dealing with life. I recommended they call mental health hotline. When they called, the technician stated they are backed up and someone will call them back when they have space. They never did, and to go through military one source if necessary. This is disturbing to me because he could have hurt himself. Is there a number or hotline to get immediate attention in Texas? Is there a hotline? I took him to the chaplain, and it's more to this one. And he spoke to...
I think that one was too big.
It was pretty long, so I don't have the other... Let me see if I can pull the tail end of it up here. Wait a minute. Oh, yeah, I got it here, so I'll read it. And he spoke to him. He did get more resources. Now he is losing hope on the system. A group of us told him we would go with him if necessary. It's so hard when you get people to go get the help and the resources, treat people like they aren't priority. Is this normal?
Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be.
Unfortunately, Jesus.
Yep.
So, one of the things with that is, like Auntie Key said, it shouldn't be normal. And depending on what dire need he was in, people have a hard time getting the help because they don't want to go to inpatient treatment. But if somebody was like directly suicidal, then I will absolutely take them to your nearest hospital because they can always do like, a small evaluation and like get them immediately to safety. But I will personally get some resources and a hotline, because there are hotlines that you can call, but it should not be the norm.
Mm-mm.
I'm sorry.
No. And the mental health field has been ill prepared for the past 2 years. Unfortunately, during COVID, everybody talked about the medical side of things, but nobody talked about the mental health side of things.
Yeah.
And so that made that had the mental health system basically under the water. And we are still underwater, and because there's not enough clinicians nationwide.
Right.
So while it shouldn't have happened, it's happening because we didn't do our part.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to mention too, like she said, like Auntie Key said, they put us underwater, it put the field underwater, but you have to recognize too that we are dealing with the pandemic in life and everything too as clinicians. So when we get that influx of clients or that influx of people and we take it on, we risk burnout, and when we burn out, then we can't help anybody. So we have to kind of temper that. But for a hotline, it really disturbs me that they said they were backed up and would call back, and then they didn't. And that is normal, and it shouldn't be. It does happen, but they didn't know how big of a crisis he was in, so that should not have happened.
I wouldn't say it's normal. I would definitely say,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not normal. That's not
It's
typically.
not a normal. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't happen as often as it happens, because you never know the crisis somebody is actually in. Like you said, they didn't know if he was going to hurt himself because they said, we'll call you back. So if he was contemplating hurting himself in that moment that he called and they said that could have pushed him right over the edge.
Mm-hmm.
Amber, you muted, honey.
Amber, you're muted.
Talking.
Yeah, because y'all know my son keep coming in here asking questions. But anyways, I did put a couple of resources up. I put National Suicide Hotline, but I actually believe they changed the number. It's now where you just dial 988, and it's for any state in the USA. But I think it's for general mental health issues now and not just suicide. So that's a resource that you can call. They also have the crisis text line, which is pretty convenient when you are not like in a mindset to talk with someone, because you can just text with a crisis counselor and you get someone immediately to talk through whatever's going on.
And I want to speak to the chaplain part of that. Chaplains, mental health professionals, if you're going to hurt yourself or if you're going to hurt somebody else, we got to report it. Chaplains and chaplain assistants have privileged communication. They can't tell a thing to a soul. So sometimes that is a good that was a very good route, and that was a very good route that you took, Lamika, because um, sometimes that's just what's needed. And so you could say, I'm going to go do whatever to anybody, and the chaplain cannot say anything. And they are all trained in mental health to be able to work with you and talk you down. And then chaplain assistants are all trained in crisis intervention. So you did a good thing.
And let me say that I just looked it up. It's actually now called the Suicide and Crisis Hotline, not just suicide. So it's still the same thing, dial 988, and you can talk with someone if you're in crisis. All right, next question would be from Abe, which is about milestones and parenting. How much emphasis do you all place on them as parents for intervention?
You mean like hitting milestones, like when a child should hit certain milestones?
Probably developmental milestones, yeah.
Milestones?
So I guess I'll go first. Developmental milestones are large, and I think that sometimes, and I'm gonna say sometimes, we put too much emphasis on them. because, if my child is not potty trained by a certain age, and that means that something's wrong. If my child is not talking by a certain age, that means that something's wrong. Well, I'm not going to pretend like I know all the ranges off the top of my head, but say like from 13 months to 18 or to 23 months, almost two, they're not talking, then some people might say, you know what, I think that something is wrong. When honestly, sometimes it just takes a little bit longer. Um, Kids who take longer to talk sometimes have siblings speaking for them. There might be hearing issues. And so for me, my motto is early intervention is the best intervention, because they may or may not be hitting their milestones on time, but why? And so there's always a why. You always need to go and see, well, okay, she may not be hitting this milestone. Why? And so I'll give a personal story. My daughter was not talking she started talking and then she stopped talking. And then about maybe around two, we were still like, what's going on? Almost two. And we found out that she had fluid on her ears. So she couldn't hear. And there was nothing where it was, she's not making her milestones because she has cognitive issues. She just couldn't hear people. And so once we got the fluid drained from her ears, within 2 weeks, she started talking. And so when you think about milestones, you need to be working closely with your pediatrician, and you need to be actually paying close attention as a parent. Because if I would have, I mean, I was paying attention, but she would run into walls, but then she was a gymnast. And so, when she got on the beam, she could do everything she needed to, but she was clumsy. And so we just had to kind of start looking into what's going on. We know that she has the ability, but what else? And that's when we found out that the fluid on her ears is impacting her speech.
Yep. The first thing you mentioned is what happened to my younger daughter. Her older sister was talking for her.
Uh-huh.
No need for her to talk, but we thought, I was like, okay, I'm getting her checked out. She wasn't even 2, and I was like, let's take her to get her checked out, because I'm all for early intervention. If something is wrong, maybe she can't hear, maybe something is wrong and we just don't know it. So I'm all for, when it comes to milestones, it's a wide spectrum. Like, you don't have to say, oh, they have to hit it by this point. It's a spectrum. It can go a little longer for some kids, and that's perfectly normal. But if you start to get a little concerned, it's okay to take her to the doctor, talk to her talk to his or her doctor, do those things just to make sure that everything is good. Because it could just be something simple, like her older sibling was talking for her. And we would tell her, okay, don't answer for her, let her talk. And it started to work.
Well, I'm all for the early intervention. If your pediatrician identifies any milestone that's delayed. Um, but I also want to put out there, I agree with both of you. That's how I approach it with my kids. I don't automatically assume the worst, but I do want to put it out there that developmental disorders start in toddler, early childhood.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yes, if your child is walking late, there is a possibility that there's a developmental delay. If your child is potty trained at like 5 or 6 years old and still has accidents, there's a possibility of a developmental delay. So it doesn't mean you go straight to it when there's a problem, because like Shug says, she wasn't talking because there's fluid in her ears. Like Auntie Ashley said, her child wasn't talking because her older sibling was speaking for her. But that is where you identify what the problem is, and then you get your child help if they need it. And I don't look at it in terms of like a developmental delay, meaning something's wrong with your child or like anything like that. It's just that their body works differently, their brain thinks differently, and they just need additional supports to get through that. And for some kids, they do grow out of it. That's a term we love to use and I hate it, but they grow out of it in terms of learning how to function and manage it a little bit better.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it completely goes away, but if you get that early intervention and they're learning how to manage whatever the problem is, and they're able to function better with that later on in life.
Yeah.
But please don't do the thing where you just say they'll grow out of it. If you really see something and you in your heart know that something might not be right, or you want to check in, and your family is saying, no, they grow out of it. He's 3. That ain't a problem. Please just go to the doctor. Talk to your doctor and see what your doctor says.
Yeah.
And don't automatically assume that if your child is diagnosed with anything, any type of developmental delay, anything, don't automatically get scared and feel like, oh, my child will never be normal or my child will never be able to thrive. There are adults right now who are famous who had developmental delays. There are adults right now who had dyslexia when they were, and still have dyslexia, and don't read the same way, but they are thriving. It does not mean anything. And if you have that early intervention, you can make sure that your child has what they need to thrive.
And
I love
you can do that through psychological testing. Me and Amber do a lot of testing, and Shug, we do a lot of testing. Sorry, Shug.
She was like, "What, you just gonna forget me?"
Well,
I'm not gonna go
that's
do no
because me and
testing. I
Amber,
don't need.
that's like our focus on that. Like we
Mhm.
focus on that.
Oh,
But
you. I thought you was gonna
you
go
know,
to another
you
question,
focus
Amber.
on that shit. That's your special.
yeah. I focus on everything.
Well,
Okay.
that's the thing too, though. With testing, I take the background information, I take the developmental delays that were reported, and I take the test data and I put it all together.
Right.
And like I said,
Right.
I've worked under several different psychologists, and I've seen a lot of them who will just take the test data or just take the symptoms and diagnose a child with something.
Yeah.
And that's an issue. It's annoying, but it's happened.
Yeah.
Amber,
Well,
Okay, next
all three of
question.
us do testing.
wait, Amber. It's a question that goes in line with what we already talking about. So can we come back to Abraham's? I'm sorry, A.
Sure, no
Yours is
problem.
important. Can you go to Ashley's question, Ashley Johnson? That
Can
one.
any old therapist diagnose ADHD or
I just
autism in adults, or
I
should
wanted
people
to
see a
pull that one
specialist?
up because they just started talking about testing. So here's the thing: I don't do testing. All three of the aunties do testing except me. Basic testing, like I can give you a basic assessment for like the GAD-7 or the PHQ-9, which are for anxiety and depression. But the testing that these three do, I don't do. Now, if someone comes to my office, can I look at the DSM and say, okay, they meet this criteria, and write that down? I could, but I won't. I will literally refer them out to get the testing, because you can still see a therapist who doesn't do the testing and go out to a therapist who does do the testing, a psychologist who does do the testing. So I don't think any old therapist should be diagnosing anything. If it's testing involved, you need to send them to where they can be tested.
Well,
Can they?
autism,
But
yeah.
can they? Yes, they
Can they?
can.
Yes. My
They
opinion,
can.
should they? Hell no.
Should they?
Hell
I
no.
Hell
have my own
no.
personal opinion. No, and that's because I test like for the past 2 years. I've literally done nothing but testing between ADHD and autism. That has literally been all my referrals for the past 2 years. So for me and how I was clinically trained, yes, any old therapist can diagnose that. And don't worry, we have had plenty of arguments with other professions who believe that they can see the same symptoms and diagnose. However, you do need certain type of measures and tests that need to be administered because ADHD has no mood component, and autism is more, related to not social emotional, sensory based language and communication deficits, and think repetitive and restricted behaviors and things of that nature.
Your
So,
social
yep,
deficit too.
Deficits.
yep,
Yeah.
social
Yeah.
deficit. So I would say if you were wanting to do that, to find a specialist. You can go to any therapist, but my opinion is go to a specialist.
Yeah.
My
Actually,
opinion is to go to a psychologist for because they do all the testing.
Yep.
And then another thing too is autism is very, I was about to say spectrumy. Okay.
It
Autism
is.
It is.
it's very iffy. I can do all the testing that me, Amber, and Keish, we all test. Keish focuses more on autism. I don't. And so I work with a specialist who diagnoses autism way more than I do. So if I suspect autism, I might say, hey, Dr. So and so, can you look at this? I think it's autism. But I have not honed that part of it because, and I could diagnose it. And sometimes, a lot of times I'm right. But as far as being comfortable enough to say, boom, that's autism, I can see it. I don't, that, every psychologist is not going to be as well versed. ADHD, first of all, I love ADHD children because they are the most creative brains. And without ADHD, we wouldn't have all these musicians and all these artists and all these people that think differently. And I think that ADHD gets a bad name because everybody thinks, oh, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder has nothing to do with hyperactivity, but more impulsivity. And so what we try to do is we try to tone like the impulsivity down so that they can function in regular society. But there's nothing wrong with your child being diagnosed with ADHD or autism. And I think that parents kind of get emotional about that because they say, well, can my kid have a normal life? They absolutely can because they'll be taught coping skills. But any old person probably won't be able to just teach them coping skills or diagnose it. So somebody said get a second opinion. I also do that. I also believe in that too, because I see diagnoses come across my desk, and I always do my own. I always do my own, just in case, because we people see things differently.
That was my auntie Mona who said that. Hi, Auntie Mona. I didn't know one of my aunts was watching,
Hey,
but
girl.
a real auntie watching. Hi, Auntie Mona. Thank you.
Well, so just to piggyback off, so the short answer is yes, they can, but no, they should not. Um, Go to a psychologist to get the psychological evaluation. I would even recommend for things that look like anxiety, it looks like depression, and you're not sure because that could also come out to be like a trauma response to something. I would just recommend getting an evaluation when it seems like when you can't understand how you're functioning or how you're presenting. The other piece too, to piggyback off what Auntie Ashley was saying, is that yes, therapists can look in the DSM and diagnose certain things, but when it comes to ADHD and autism, those are neurodevelopmental disorders. There is no way for someone to look at a child or spend, unless it's for autism, unless it's super, super, super apparent, like really apparent, you can't diagnose that without doing any type of testing to see how their brain works, to see how they socialize, to see how
Mhm.
they process things, how they reason. There's no way. So I would really recommend anytime you need testing, just go to a psychologist.
Yep, absolutely. And you specified in this question in adults. So autism, funny enough,
Oh, I
Oh,
didn't
we
hear
talking
that
about
part.
kids.
We talk about
funny
kids.
funny enough, autism, I just was reading up on some research earlier today and yesterday actually. They just in 2020 started to really look into diagnosing autism in adults because these are usually neurodevelopmental disorders. So they look for them in children. So
Yeah.
it's often harder for adults to get diagnosed. They really just started doing research on adult autism like in the past couple of years. So you really want to make sure you go to, I mean, they've been doing it, but I mean, really focusing on it according to the research I was reading. But you really want to go to a psychologist and get assessments. You really want to get a second opinion if you're an adult trying to figure out if you might have ADHD or autism. You really want to make sure you get the correct testing done. And like I said, I'm gonna refer you out. If I see the signs of it, I'm like, hey, I want to refer you out to a specialist to get some tests done, and we can talk all the way through it, all the way through the process. But I want them to test you.
Yeah. In adults, it's a little more difficult because ADHD and autism are neurodevelopmental. It means that this has been going on for their entire life and there was some kind of delay as a child or at birth, something happened. And so they don't always know that.
Right.
So it's a little more difficult. I can say that I've learned and I've done research too on autism in women versus men, and it presents completely different.
Yep.
So for men, it's a little more apparent that it's autism by the diagnostic criteria. For women, they camouflage a lot. They're able to fit in, they're able to function on a daily basis, but it's super exhausting for them. So a
Mhm.
lot of the times they're misdiagnosed with generalized anxiety when it's actually autism. And the only way to identify whether it's autism is to do a test that specifically tests for autism. So go to a psychologist and get your
Yeah.
evaluation done.
Answer your
Abraham got a
question bluntly. Yes, they can. No, they shouldn't.
Yeah.
Period.
We have one last question before we go today. It's about the prison systems.
Okay.
So, do our prison systems have counselors embedded into them? Would you consider taking a career with the Department of Corrections? I would not. What do y'all think?
No.
I
I thought
would.
about it. There was one near where I like moving to, and they were paying pretty well, but their system was set up like literally all like the resources, and I believe that every prison system should have a lot of resources, especially for individuals who re-enter back in society.
Mhm.
So, but this prison system was like top notch. But other ones, I mean, there's probably social workers there, but 50%, at least from the research I read a while ago, 50% of the prison population has mental health. And so if we don't have enough people there, there definitely should be more counselors there, more therapists there, because
Yep.
they're individuals as well, and also considered a vulnerable population according to research.
I would do
So
it.
I couldn't.
I would do it. I would
I
do it in a
would do
heartbeat.
it. I would do it to learn something new and to understand that this is a vulnerable population and needs representation and help as well. So I would, but right now I'm going children.
I would do it. And so the reason why it's funny because I love I'm all over the place. I'm one of those people who like I can't be put in a box. I always got to do something different. And the reason why I would do the prison system is because they don't rehabilitate. And that's the thing that bothers me is that people go to prison and they're treated like crap in prison and then they're expected to get out and go and get pushed back into society and they're expected to live like these law-abiding citizens when a lot of them got changed in prison. Khalif Browder is always one that just bothers me because he went to prison for a backpack and he came out and he if I'm not mistaken he's the one that ended up killing himself because he was just like it was too much for him, so they changed who he was at his core and then they put him out on the streets and was like, well, why can't you live right? We don't understand. But he was in there for years and years and years. And so I think that what happens with people who go to prison is that we already know a lot of black men are in prison and they don't belong there. And so what's happening to your mental health when you're in prison? What's happening to your mental health when you're on your way out of prison? What happens to women who have babies in prison? These people don't have people to represent them or advocate for them. And first of all, the prison system does pay well. I did see it out here in Shreveport paying pretty good, but I got to finish some things before I do that. But I feel like if you're advocating for a population, advocate for the population who is thirsty and need and need you to advocate for them. So I would do it in a heartbeat. I'm thinking
Yeah.
about it.
They have
Well,
such a bad
I
way.
just
Oh,
I wouldn't do it just because it's even like it might even be a trauma type of thing for me, like minor trauma. But I used to work in juvenile corrections, and those little boys were just off the chain. When I would
I'm
go
glad.
visit them, I'm trying to do therapy with you, and you over here making sexual comments and doing all this. So ever since then, it's just like it's triggering for me to go in that environment because the kids were saying some stuff that I ain't even heard no adult men say to me.
yeah.
So I can't do it.
I can't do it either, but for a different reason. Yes, the prison population is one of the most underserved and they need it the most. One of the populations that needs help the most. But I couldn't do it because I can't place myself in such a broken system that requires such advocacy to fix the systemic issues in it. I would be trying to fight wars that weren't even on the agenda for me. I would go in there trying to help the doggone prisoners and be cussing out the warden and stuff
You
because
would, and you stay
that's
out of there.
who I am.
That's why you need to be a lawyer. We've been trying to tell you. We've been trying to tell you.
My passion for advocacy for things that are systemically jacked up is too strong. And then the other thing is you don't get to pick and choose which prisoners you work with. And I already know that I cannot work with sex offenders. So see, I wouldn't be able to say, no, I can't work with that prisoner. I wouldn't be able to say that. Yep. So I'm not going to place myself in a position to even have to confront that. And not because some people might say, well, you got to confront it to know if you can. I can't work with sex offenders. We get to decide which populations we know would be a trigger for us. And that would be a trigger for me. So I can't do that. But yeah, I'd be trying to destroy the whole system. I can't do that.
Auntie, actually, you are not the only person who has ever said that. I work with people, not worked, but worked with people who have been in the prison system. And they say the same exact thing, that it is so overwhelming because they need such an overhaul of the system because it's that terrible.
That bad.
Yeah. You'd be fired in a week.
I would be fired quick
in a week.
Talking too much. I recently had the privilege of doing a psych eval at a prison, and outside of the fact that it stank and I have a phobia of filth, I loved it. Like I was like, oh my god, this is where I want to be. At least
forensic.
Yeah, I mean, but you see, I like to dabble in everything, right? It was where I wanted to be because just to be able to say, let me look at this person, not let me look at this person and say, he checks this box, this box, this box. Let me make sure that somebody's not going to prison and they're not supposed to be in there. Let me be one of the checks and balances. Now, there's always, the flip side to where you might put somebody in there that don't need to be in there, but that's a risk you run. But I found it, I thought it would have been a rewarding thing. It might be thankless, but
I'm glad half of us on the panel would do it because that's a good thing. That means half of us will be there to help those prisoners. Because me, I would get fired in 30 days.
I wouldn't even be there. I just so I know we're like 14 minutes over our time. We had one last question come in last minute. Y'all cool to answer that? Or should we
Where's it?
DM the person?
Where is the question?
Says, how can you teach yourself you will be okay? Can you make a large change instead of being stuck? And then hashtag anxiety. How do you teach? Yeah,
How do you teach yourself you will be okay?
be okay. And can you make, or do you make a large change instead of being? How do you make a large change instead of being stuck? Or do you? I
How
think
can
she's trying
you
to say, do you?
That's the
hold on a
education.
That's that
second?
seventh grade.
How can you
That's
teach
that seventh
yourself?
grade.
How can you
Do you
teach
read?
yourself that you'll be okay? That you can make a large change instead of being stuck.
There we
I'm
Oh,
go.
assuming that's what it is.
well, I'm a proponent of, first of all, teach yourself that it's okay to not be okay. That is perfectly fine. You don't have to be okay. Saying you're not okay is actually the first step. Once you recognize you're not okay, then you can start the process of teaching yourself how to cope in a healthy way and how to manage. But you have to acknowledge it's okay that I'm not okay right now. It's okay that I'm dealing with this and I'm struggling. I just need to find the tools. I need to talk to somebody, and I need to figure out how to get to that place where I don't feel so stuck.
There you go.
Not
Okay.
y'all not gonna say nothing else.
Oh, I thought you was answering it.
But
Well,
everybody,
that was
everybody,
answer. I mean, I agree. I think the first part, like you said, is like recognizing that you might not be okay. It depends on what kind of change you're making,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you're making a really big change in your life, that's anxiety provoking because you don't know what's going to happen. And a lot of times, even people that don't have clinical levels of anxiety will sit and think about all the horrible things that could possibly happen with this big change. So the first thing is to stop yourself from having those thoughts about what could potentially happen because you don't know. It could turn out really positive, it could turn out negative, but either way, you're going to deal with it, right? You're going to roll with it and you're going to come through. I would also say tap into your social supports, the people that are around you, and let them know how you're feeling about this change that's coming up. Because sometimes, they might have a different perspective or they may be able to support you in a certain way. Just a small part to that too is telling people how they can support you. Because sometimes you call someone needing some help and they're like, "Oh, it's going to be okay." And that is not what you need to hear in the moment, right? So letting people know like, "Hey, you know what? This is how you can support me." To this friend, maybe to your parent, this is how you can support me. To this other person, and tap into your social circle.
Mhm. Another thing too, go to therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go to
And
therapy.
just to answer tap this question, I'm in therapy. Amber's in therapy. So
I was in therapy. I
I
I
have.
was.
was,
I'm getting back into it though.
I was.
I
so
I
as
was.
a
told, I told
clinician,
Auntie Shug it's hard for therapists to find therapists. That's something
mhm,
people don't recognize. A lot of therapists don't want to see a therapist, don't want to work
it's
with.
hard for Ashley to find a therapist.
No, it's hard for a lot of therapists to find a
Mhm.
therapist.
She said, "What do y'all do to ensure we stay abreast on current research?" We have to. It
Yeah, we
has
don't
to
have
be
a
like
choice.
within like an eight, I think, year time frame. So it's our job and our duty to stay up on current research. Hell, we can even do our own research if we choose to. So
Yeah, and
that's what we do.
another reason to jump on what Keisha's saying is that we have to do CEs
Yep.
every year. And so those CEs keep us abreast of current research.
Yep.
And we have to do so many of them. And then as a counselor and as a psychologist or as a budding psychologist, okay, I have to do double the CEs. And even Keisha as a social worker and a psychologist, she has to do double the CEs. So we always make sure that we are spouting out the newest information. And if not, let me know. Don't be ashamed to say it, and we'll go look it up if we don't have the answer for you.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I
Yeah.
try. I
Yeah,
try to do as many trainings as I can. I try to do a lot of trainings, a lot of research, CEU classes that offer CEU credits because I need them. Just we have to. We don't have a choice,
Right.
or we won't be able to maintain our license.
Mhm.
yeah. And I was just gonna add that anytime I encounter something that I haven't seen before, or anytime I'm looking at some test scores and I'm like, "Whoa, I don't know what's going on here," I tend to hop on and do a little bit of research as well. So that's another way of keeping myself
Yep.
up on game. Because there have been a couple of times where something that I've learned maybe last year or the year before has either been researched again and there's more information, or it's no longer a thing. So I do try to make sure that I research independently as well as doing some of the formal trainings.
And we consult with different professionals too. Like if
Yeah.
somebody is specialized in something and we don't know, we will go and address or speak to this person who has this specialty. So we call it consultation.
Yeah, I talk to Auntie Sugar about the kids all the time because that's not my specialty. Kids are not my specialty, so I talk to her.
Hi, Kayla. Conferences and presentation. That's my homegirl from Arizona, y'all. She's a psychologist out in Arizona. So she's
Hey,
everybody.
see y'all, we out here. We all in.
Hey.
We out here.
All right. So it looks like we got everything we needed. We good, right?
I think so.
Yes, please like, subscribe, share,
Yes,
share away. We have found that we are getting a lot of support and we really are grateful for it. And now we're finding out, since we become a little bit more, popular, that some of our support is coming from people we don't even know. And so it's important because our goal is to get mental health into our community. Okay, into every community, but into our community. It's FUBU. So we want to make sure that we are getting the best information out there to people who need it. And we know that the Black community is an underserved community, and we know that we need information. And so whoever you can like, subscribe, and share it to, we're here to help every single culture, every single person. But we definitely want us to start honing in on our inner power.
Yeah, and so join us on Friday for our episode on family dynamics. We talk about all kinds of things, mainly mom-daughter relationship, but we also talk about parentified children, which is a hot topic. And then next Friday, we are releasing an episode on suicide. I know someone was talking about that earlier in the episode. So that's going to be a really good episode as well.
It is Suicide Prevention Month, so that's why we wanted to make sure we did that in September.
Yep.
And real quick before we hang up, whoever that was earlier, hang up.
We hanging up.
Don't you hang up online too? I don't know. Anyway,
I'm trying to flip on.
Whoever I can't remember the person, the viewer who was talking about. We were talking about the advocacy of mental health and preventative maintenance. Sharing this platform is advocacy and preventative maintenance. Sharing
Absolutely.
Because somebody mentioned that in there. I just shared the clinical cookout stuff. That can help somebody.
Oh, somebody said that. Thank you for sharing, whoever it was, because it's I can't find out.
Wait, maybe I can.
The girl who asked about the ADHD and the autism question. I think that's who shared it.
Yeah, I think so.
It was Ashley
Johnson. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ashley, for sharing. We appreciate it. Spread the love, y'all. We're trying to do a good thing out here. Support us.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
All
right, what y'all about to do?
Oh my God. He's so annoying.
Bye.